like as a woman watching all of this unfold, I'm actually very distressed because I can see how much we are accelerating with this stupidity.
And now, let's get into our first topic for today, which is a truly insane story out of Australia that we've got to break down with the help of our friend, YouTuber, and Aussie political commentator, Sydney Watson. So Sydney, some insane stuff is going down in your homeland, down in Australia. We've got to talk about a case, Tickle versus Giggle, about a trans woman who took to the courts to try to force their way onto a female-only app. I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. First, I want to play you some swooning coverage that really paints Tickle out to be this heroine, I guess you'd have to say, in their coverage. Take a listen to this from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC.
It's a fight Roxanne Tickle says stole 3 years of her life.
There is so much hate and bile cast on trans and gender diverse people simply because of who we are.
In 2021, she joined the women-only social networking app Giggle, submitting a selfie assessed by AI to be female. But that was later manually overridden and her account was restricted. Ms Tickle sued the app's founder, Sal Grover, claiming discrimination on the basis of gender identity. She has a birth certificate stating her gender as female and has undergone gender-affirming surgery. Giggle's legal team considered sex to mean the sex of a person at birth. Today, a judge said those arguments were contrary to 30 years of precedent. Those cases established that in its ordinary meaning, sex is changeable.
Unfortunately, it is the judgment we anticipated, and the fight for women's rights in Australia continues.
The judge found there had been indirect gender identity discrimination against Roxanne Tickle because she was excluded from using the app after Giggle staff, in their view, determined she did not look sufficiently female.
I brought my case to show trans people that you can be brave and that you can stand up for yourself.
I think that this judgment sends the message that we want an inclusive society in which all can participate, and that includes trans people as well as people who have a range of sexual orientations.
The judge declined to order an apology as requested, saying it would be devoid of sincerity. For now, the app remains offline. Jamie McKinnell, ABC News, Sydney.
So, Sydney, is Roxanne Tickle the heroine of this story?
Well, apparently, according to the ABC, yeah. I don't know how they could have made that broadcast and put that little bit together seriously and spoken about this in the way that they did with a straight face. But it goes to show. So I think that one of the things that's really, really depressing about any situation that unfolds like this, that pertains to a trans-identified male who goes into female spaces and then complains when women are not interested in having that trans-identified male there, is that they will rally all these additional women around them. And I don't understand how these women are incapable of understanding the viewpoint of the women who are cross about this. Like, they act as if you have some sort of massive, I don't know, mental issue, that you're not that clever, that you're just a bigot, that you're just all these things. And it's like, no, we want to protect our female spaces. We want to, make sure that our female spaces are for females. Like, I don't know why this is so complicated for them.
Yeah, it is weird because you'd think that they'd understand. So the point of this app, guys, Giggle, is simply to be for female-only connections and groups and spaces, right? And obviously a trans woman is somebody who is biologically male. Now, what I have so many problems with this story that I struggle to even know where to begin, but one of them is like, why is this trans person trying to force their way into a space they're not wanted? That's something from within the LGBT community I've never understood. I've never understood the gay couple that went and hounded that Christian baker and said, "You will bake me a wedding cake." Personally, yeah. I don't want someone to bake a wedding cake who doesn't believe in my wedding for me. And I also wouldn't want to be in a space that I'm not welcomed in, or that the owners tried to create specifically not for me. That's a mentality that I don't understand. And I don't understand why people are so quick to view someone engaging in that kind of behavior as some sort of brave or heroic figure when they're essentially just pestering other people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think the frustration that I had in this case was listening to the judge. I don't know if you watched the judge's full remarks, but there were so many things that the judge said in this case that were just certifiably wrong. And it was so bizarre to listen to him reference existing legislation or, try to interpret what already existed and then come to the conclusion that sex is changeable. That basically he sort of chastised the Giggle side of things and basically called them out because they don't consider Roxanne Tickle a woman or female. Oh, and then I'm sure that you've come into contact with this, but one of the things that he said was that Roxanne Tickle is in fact a woman because it's designated on Roxanne Tickle's birth certificate. There's an F there, which apparently means that now you're also female. But I mean, forget, right, the biology of the situation. Forget the fact that Roxanne Tickle has, in every way, shape, and form, all of the characteristics of a male. Forget all of that, right? As long as that little F exists, that's what counts. And it's just
Yeah,
so
I mean, if I
maddening
changed
to
my
me.
birth certificate to say that I'm a cat, I wouldn't become a cat. It is
Right.
just a piece of paper at the end of the day.
Right. I mean, you have to kind of consider too, like how psychotic it is that not only in Australia, but just across the board, you can change these pieces of documentation to reflect a state of being that you don't actually have. Like female and male are pretty binary designations. You can't just decide that you're going to be one or the other, get your paperwork changed, and then go, look, here, here, here. I always think about the example when people say, like, when someone goes into the hospital, the way that medical staff treat a male or a female is very different because our bodies are different. It's crazy to me that the people are acting as if we're just, all gray amoeba people walking around exactly the same biologically. It's just madness.
Yeah, when I first encountered the idea of trans, I was in college and they said, well, sex is different from gender, right? People have a sex, but then they have this gender identity. And some people want to live the world as if they're the other sex and they identify with this other gender. But now it's just like, no, sex is just also gender and it's all just made up and it's whatever you say it is. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing for them to be pushing because no one's really ever going to buy that, no matter what legal documents they change. Everyone with common sense knows biological sex exists and knows that a trans woman, I've always been perfectly happy for them to live however they want, but they're still a biological male. I mean, I'm not going to suddenly start denying that. It's like the Orwell scene with am I holding up 5 fingers or 4 fingers? And they
Right.
keep making you repeat it over and over again until you admit the wrong answer is actually the truth. I don't think most people will do that. But I guess, Sydney, for listeners who are kind of curious about this stuff, because it gets a lot of clicks, it gets a lot of attention, but why does this actually matter, right? That just the idea of female only spaces and something like an app for social clubs or something like that, what's the actual significance of this that makes it a pressing priority rather than just kind of a sensational culture war item?
Well, I think the first thing is that, and I'm sure that you agree with this, you have women and men who are entitled to their own spaces free of the other sex. Like that is one basis here that I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention to, is that you are actually entitled to be around your own sex if you so desire without the other sex present. People may say that that's discriminatory. I don't think it is, because as long as there's other public spaces where everyone can be together, fine, fair enough. But if you want to have a Boy Scouts that's just for Boy Scouts, go right on ahead and do that. So that's number one. Number two is that when you have legislators determining that women aren't entitled to those single sex spaces, that's a massive problem in the long run, because it means that should you just identify as a female or as a woman, you would now have access to all of these women who don't want you in their space. So really what you're doing is you're overriding the rights of an entire sex so that a handful of people can feel comfortable and safe and included and whatnot. And so this is broader than just this culture wars. Oh, it's on the internet, everyone's arguing on Twitter. That's not the basis of the issue. It's not just this thing that we can talk about on the internet and cry about on the internet and know it goes away. It has actual far-reaching ramifications. This will probably inform other legislation in Australia. This will probably inform other legal cases in Australia. And basically it determines that woman and female don't really have any meaning. I mean, again, you have a judge who just said that basically sex is changeable. That's crazy. That has never been an understanding that we have had in the entirety of the existence of humans. We have never abided by that. And suddenly that's the case. And this is why this is such a landmark issue, and why this case is such a landmark issue.
Yeah, and I think people would be mistaken if they think this is really about the app, right? This is just some random app that never even caught on. It's not really about
It's
that.
not.
And
Yeah.
the ramifications of this, you end up with things like biological males in female prisons going on to
Yes.
forcibly impregnate people or women in the prison. It's like once you erode these sex-based barriers, there are much more serious ramifications than just a
Yes.
dating app. And we're seeing this with high-level sport and women having opportunities taken away from them by biologically male athletes. But yes, we're also seeing this in the literal prison system, which endangers the physical safety of women. And
Yes.
I also think that it is ironic to me to hear in this news package Tickle talk about the adversity that one faces as a trans woman, because I think this kind of thing is like if I was trying to design a way to make trans acceptance go down or make backlash. Say that I was like a hardcore Christian and I was like, what can I do to get the LGBTs back stigmatized by society again? I'd come up with something like this, right? And yet, so you have them simultaneously playing the victim because they get backlash while doing things that are totally unnecessary. This trans person could have just gone about their life and moved on and gone to a different app where they were welcome. Doing
Yep.
things that are totally unnecessary to antagonize vulnerable groups like females who many people who would seek out something like this, it's because they've had some sort of bad experience with males, right? That's part of it for some of them. And to do something that the public isn't going to like and just bring upon more backlash to you, but then that
Mhm.
backlash is more proof of your own victimhood. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you bring up such a good point with the males in female prisons. That's becoming, I mean, it already was an issue, but it's becoming an even bigger issue because with self-identification
And that's
and
happening
people
in
just
America too.
Oh, big time. I mean, California is one of the biggest places where this is going on. Washington State is another one where it's huge. New Jersey is another one where it's huge. I mean, you hear about all these horrible, horrible stories, and the women in the prisons. And I know this is, sort of adjacent to the tickle issue, but it's so ridiculous to say like Giggle v
Tickle
Tickle.
versus Giggle is a bizarre name.
It's so silly. But and I know that this is like I said, a little adjacent, but you have women who are actually being told that they can't say anything or speak out and are being shamed into silence. They're already in kind of a pretty precarious situation as women in prison as it is, because most women who are in prison are not there for violent crime. They're there for drug offenses or prostitution, usually like low level crimes that have shorter prison sentences anyway. And then you introduce these men, a lot of whom have violent histories, and we're supposed to just sit back and be like, oh yeah, this is normal. And then on top of that, tell those women that they can't have a say. It's like as a woman watching all of this unfold, I'm actually very distressed because I can see how much we are accelerating with this stupidity, and how much we're accelerating towards, I think, things that are going to be considerably worse than where we're at now. And I'm distressed and upset that legislators, that people in the judicial system don't have our back. Like they don't have our back at all, and I just simply can't wrap my head around having this much disdain for women, that you would undermine our rights and freedoms and security all the time.
While calling yourself a feminist. It
Yes.
really. All right, Sydney. Well, thanks for your perspective on this. Folks should check out your YouTube channel for more, which I will link to. And thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me.